This week, we welcome Matt Allen, the Senior Solutions Engineer at Viavi Solutions, to discuss even collaboration between NetOps and SecOps in today's world. On our second segment, we welcome Lori Craner. She's the Director of Scilab Security and Privacy Institute at Carnegie Mellon University. She will be on to discuss research and security and privacy labels for IoT devices. In the security news, we're going to talk a lot about Zoom. Dave Kennedy's coming on to help us talk about Zoom. We tried to get a lot of other people to come on and talk, but one could not, and Zoom did not respond to comments, but I don't think we're unique in that situation. But there were Zoom zero-day flaws uncovered, which we'll tell you about, and lots of other Zoom news, including a new war dialer for Zoom rooms. Millions of routers running OpenWRT are vulnerable to attack. Marriott says 5.2 million guest records were stolen in another data breach, so you have to change your password again. Proof of concept exploits for CVE 2020-0796 SMB Ghost privilege escalation were published. And of course, again, Dave Kennedy will be with us, which I'm very excited about, to talk about video chat client vulnerabilities, specifically Zoom. All that and more on this episode of Paul's Security Weekly.
This is Security Weekly, for security professionals, by security professionals. Broadcasting live from G-Unit Studios in Rhode Island, it's the show where exploits run wild, packets aren't the only things getting sniffed, and the cocktails flow steady. It's Paul's Security Weekly. Qualys is introducing a new prescription for security, and it's free. Global IT Asset Discovery and Inventory. Activate it today at securityweekly.com/Qualys so you can achieve 100% near real-time visibility across your hybrid environments. The question is simple. Have any of the systems on my network been compromised? The answer is harder than it should be. Enter AI Hunter. Active Countermeasures has automated and streamlined techniques used by the best pen testers and threat hunters in the industry to create AI Hunter, a network threat hunting solution that does the first pass of a hunt for you to identify systems that are most likely to be compromised and scores the results on a scale from 0 to 100. You can then research those systems in depth with AI Hunter. Focus your valuable time on the systems that need your expertise with AI Hunter. Sign up for a personal demo today at securityweekly.com/ACM.
And welcome to the show. Once again, practicing safe social distancing. But first, let me introduce you to a man who always wears pants when he goes to the Zoom room, Mr. Paul Asadorian.
Well, welcome to Paul's Security Weekly. It's episode 645, recorded on April 2nd, 2020 in G-Unit Studios. Well, I'm in G-Unit Studios, but everyone else is in fact remote. And speaking of remote people, Mr. Larry Pesce is here with us from the bunker.
Yes, I just cracked open a bottle of Redemption, and hopefully won't drink the whole thing tonight.
Yeah, let's not do that. What is that keyboard behind you, Larry? Is that the one that you custom built?
No, this was one that I bought from Drop. It was kind of neat. USB and Bluetooth for up to multiple systems for Bluetooth. Yeah. It's not great. It works. Gotcha. I mostly use it as a spare keyboard for stuff around. Right. Now this is the one that I custom built.
Yeah, that's beautiful. It's gorgeous. Yeah. A lot of love went into that one. That's awesome.
Yes.
Mr. Jeff Mann is here with us. Jeff, welcome.
Hi, Paul. How you doing?
You got some Tribe of Hacker stuff, huh?
One of them's blurry.
The important one. How's that?
That's even blurrier.
There we go.
Yeah, you might want to change your...
Let me turn off that stupid special effect.
Yes.
How's that?
Very nice. Tribe of Hackers. We'll talk a little bit about that at the top of the news segment.
The new edition is out. Yeah.
Very nice. Mr. Lee Neely is here with us. Lee, welcome.
Good to be here. We're Shelly just brought me a nice something or other.
Ooh, that's a really nice big glass of wine. That's awesome.
Okay. We're ready for the show.
Yes. Mr. Tyler Robinson is here with us, whose video just dropped out, but I believe there he is. Tyler, you there? Oh, I think you're muted. Are you muted? He's still trying to talk, but he can't.
So you guys have done video conferencing with Tyler before, right?
This is par for the. We call this par for the course, right?
Yes.
I do want to thank Tyler. Special shout out to Tyler on recommending a new laptop. We got talking about it after a show a couple weeks ago, and I was like, you know what? I really do need a new laptop. Like I have and I did like some quick observations. I'm like, in the entire company here at Security Weekly, not that we're that big, but I'm like, I have the slowest laptop out of everyone. Like it is time. Right? It is time to upgrade, get a replacement for mine. And we cycle all of our laptops back into production for the travel rigs and doing other production. I'm like, well, I got a good use case for my old one, and Tyler recommended an MSI Prestige 15, which is what I ended up getting, and it came in today. And I was in love when I opened up the box, to be honest with you. And it's just a little heavier than my 13 or 14 inch, whatever it was before, which is to be expected. But it's like a full workstation in one of the most compact laptops to have that power that I've ever seen. So I'm super, super excited. Us nerds love our gear. So a couple of quick announcements before we get started. We've officially migrated our mailing list back to our original platform. We apologize for any double mailings or lack of mailings that you may have received in the interim. We do have a much clearer strategy now. It was something that didn't get a whole lot of focus from a lot of us that had worked on that previously. So we have our categories nailed down. We've basically categorized information security into 55 different categories. That is all working its way into the mailing list, customizing the mailings that you receive. We have plans to improve our mailing list, so we're sending out content and much better communications, in addition to letting everyone know about upcoming webcasts and virtual trainings. Webcast is undergoing a little bit of a facelift to give our viewers what I believe more people want, which is more technical information. So there'll be more technical information in our webcasts from both Security Weekly and our sponsors. We have several coming up. I know the one coming up with Core Security, of course, is we had a meeting about it today where it's going to take a much more technical focus for that one. And so you can visit securityweekly.com/subscribe. You can join the list as well as subscribe to all of our shows. And we will update your interests, and you will receive information in emails about your interests. So Matt Allen is here with us. He is a senior solutions engineer at Viave. Prior to Viave, Matt has garnered 20 years of experience in the network engineering and telecommunication space. He holds certifications in Amazon Cloud, Microsoft, Cisco, and more. He has walked the walk, and now he's going to talk the talk. If you want to learn more about Viave, visit securityweekly.com/Viave. Matt, welcome to the show.
Hey, thanks for having me.
Nice to have you on, Matt. We had a great prep call. We literally just like sat around and talked like basically like schoolgirls, like just chatting. So it was really funny. But you wanted to, well, first, Matt, give us a little bit about your background before we dig into it. How'd you get your start in information security?
Sure thing. First, I wanted to mention I feel a little bit underprepared because I didn't know we were doing cigars and wine and bourbon. First thing I got, I have tea in here, but this is the closest I can get. I'll have a Guinness after we finish up here. I forgot you guys are East Coast, so it's 5 o'clock somewhere, right?
That's right.
So basically, I got my start at, if you remember, At Home Networks, and then they merged and became Excite at Home.
I think the first, it's kind of funny, Matt, the first internet cable provider was called Cox at Home.
Yeah.
Which is a bad name.
Yeah. And those email addresses were in high demand.
Yes.
Like the guy who had workingathome.com was just like loving life. But in any case, so worked in their network operations center. That was an amazing experience of being able to, actually physically swap cards on routers and get your hands dirty and get away from kind of the theoretical getting certification done and real world experience. Fell in love with it, kind of progressed through data backup. And that's when I started to get more interested in all the kinds of policies like, HIPAA and PCI and all those compliance things. And when I joined what's now Viave Formerly it was known as Network Instruments. If anybody's familiar with that, they've been, making essentially packet sniffer, high-end network recorder for several decades, Gartner leader for 6 years, and the product was too neat to pass up. So I joined them. I do a little bit of post-sales, pre-sales, do things like this, just sort of a jack of all trades. The certifications I've got in the meantime, you mentioned the Amazon Cloud one. I got my ethical hacker certification, and that really kind of relit my just fascination with security and what's happening in the world today. It's really unique, and it just keeps getting more and more, I guess, interesting / frightening. Is a good way to put it, but that's me, and that's kind of where I come from.
That's awesome. The topic for this segment is the interaction between NetOps and SecOps. And I think we first need to maybe lay the foundation and talk about what typically are the roles in a network operations group, in a security operations group, and maybe some of the other teams that might fall under those umbrellas or have dotted lines, such as your maybe separate teams for cloud. Or how cloud and on-prem networking and cloud networking, is that the same group? Is it different groups? You have a lot of interaction with these types of organizations, so I guess kind of lay the foundation for the conversation.
Absolutely, and we spoke briefly about this, and what's interesting is how things have evolved over the decades. Before there was a clear delineation, the network guys did blah, and you could usually point at routers, firewalls, switches, all that stuff. The server guys did blah. They managed the operating systems, the services, the proxies, whatever. And then the security guys were kind of this overlay where they had to approve all changes. And if they didn't, then everything came to a stop. At least that was kind of what I was exposed to in the what I call old school network engineering type thing. Now what you have kind of to varying degrees are a lot of specialists mixed with generalists. So I've gone into some cases to where the security team will be one guy and he's relying on the entire networking team to do their best practices and make sure the networking is secure. And that theme kind of goes into when you talk about cloud or when you talk about adopting a new technology. Personally, I started seeing it when virtualization really took off. And you had CFOs saying, I went to a conference and I'm learning that my competitor has an advantage because they're adopting this technology. So we need to do it. And you end up moving forward without having a specialist. You'll have somebody that knows it and is pretty good, but doesn't have that in-depth knowledge to do it with, 100% security, that confidence, right? And it's happened again with cloud. I'd say it's happening again with containerization. And I think it's going to keep happening because the time for when you release something has shrunk so dramatically. There's no longer like 1 quarter for a release. They're doing the waterfall agile development and they're releasing all the time. So that old time of, well, the security team has to check mark every change that happens.
Yeah, it's not happening.
That's well and gone.
And what I find interesting, and I want to get everyone's perspective on this, right, is kind of where we're at today in terms of deploying applications. I think there are very clear lines between, we wrote this application in-house, right? We employed developers. They're writing code, and they're writing it on some kind of platform, and we have to manage that, but we're writing our own code, right? Yeah. It's very different from, I need to stand up this new service, and it's not our code. That could be open source, that could be commercial, that could be something perhaps in the cloud. Cloud native kind of toes both lines, I think, right? And how do we do that today, right? How do we have the same, maybe similar processes for doing both, but not all of the tools and techniques transfer? And then, like, which group do we fall in if we're writing cloud transformation scripts? Are we a developer? Are we a network admin? Or are we a sysadmin? Or are we some new kind of admin, right?
That's a great point. I think someone else want to chime in here? I feel like I'm rambling on. Yes. Sorry about that.
No. Well, stop rambling and I'll chime in. Matt, good to see you again, by the way.
Good to see you too.
I think one of the immediate thoughts that I had as you're asking this sort of open-ended question, Paul, is, sort of defining or putting your arms around, we have our own developers. And that I think of recent customers where their own developers are what we used to call offshore. I don't know if that's still a term or not, but contractors outsourced. Very, very geographically dispersed.
In India is what you mean.
In India. And that's one aspect, but another aspect is simply more from and I think we've talked about this on other shows, there's so much integration of frameworks and building blocks that what does being your own developer even mean these days?
Right.
When you're putting so many kind of cookie cutter pieces together.
No, it's a great point, Jeff. The lines are blurred for me as well. I've tried to really push into, I want to use all of the tools and techniques that developers are using in a DevOps process today to do what I would traditionally deem as systems and network administration, and that it gets blurry as we assign roles. How do you see enterprises today kind of managing this shift in all these blurred lines between these different groups?
I'll again say that it seems to be decided like from a CFO decision, to where if they put priority on time to market, then they outrank a lot of other decisions. And I'd say that this also applies with the blanket term shadow IT. In the past, if I'm talking like, I don't know, 15 years ago, if I say, I want to share all these documents with this other department and I'm having trouble doing it, go, well, you have to wait on IT to do it. Now you have employees that feel enabled to where it's like, I'm just going to put it on Dropbox. That's what's happening. And the fallout for that is minimal at best. So it has to come from the top down. And this goes back to NetOps versus SecOps. I talk with both of those teams a lot. I'm starting to talk to development teams more, but the tug of war is real. And trying to navigate it goes, like I said, from the top down. If they basically say, okay, these guys are in charge, we've had a lot of changes, recently at enterprises where all of a sudden everyone can be working from home, right? And we're talking 10, 100,000, 10,000 people. Network engineering or IT, they want to get everybody working. Security is concerned, is this going to expand my attack surface and people are going to get in? What am I going to do with it? Let's try and have everybody use two-factor authentication. Which one of those wins? It really comes down to the culture of the company, how big it is, where they put their priorities, and it is a big mix of what they decide to do.
It's interesting, the evolution, and I'll share with you, and Matt, I shared this with you on our call, is in my own experiences, right, when I worked for the university specifically, it's a very good example of how this evolution, is taking place. So when I first started at the university, I was in the systems administration group, right? We had basically a bunch of Unix systems back then, and I had root access on all of them, and I was responsible for the care and feeding of them with the focus on security. I was hired because I had some experience in security, and I was going to do some firewall stuff as well. And what I found is, working as a sysadmin, I had control and power over the Unix systems, but if I needed something security-wise, even in the firewalls I managed or the network infrastructure, I had very little influence, let alone any power and control. So then it shifted. Then I went to work in the network group, and I lost all of my access to all of the Unix systems because I was no longer in that group, but I had a lot more power and control over the network side of things. I had access to all the routers and switches now in the organization because I was in that group, but I had very little influence over how maybe well patched or what applications were happening in systems. And then there was this, people went to conferences and they said, well, security should be in its own group. And then I lost access to everything. And it was a bad scene, and I had to go as high up in the chain as I could and say, we're going to be in a lot of trouble if I don't have some operational controls. So they put me back in network engineering, And then I had my own systems, which was kind of weird, right? So like I was managing Linux systems then, and the network stuff, and responsible for VPNs and firewalls, and that worked great for a while. Now, since then, 2007-ish is when I left the university. Now all those, interactions are, I think, still coming full circle, right? Because now you've got cloud thrown in the mix, you've got still networking operations that need to happen, and you've got systems administration, and you've got developers. And how do we all interact with each other and get security's job done? I'll conclude my little kind of story by saying I think we truly win and truly evolve when security doesn't have to be involved in operations. When as a security professional, I don't have to be hands-on with VPN concentrators, firewalls, network switches, and systems and cloud configurations, right? When we can go do research, test things in a lab, implement our own security solutions, perhaps, maybe with the aid of those other groups, but the other groups are implementing security within their group. So, Matt, how do you see security being embedded? Is there a champion in each group today?
I'd say absolutely. Sorry about that. Again, there's no one answer to it. And what really surprised me is the silos that are so high, even at mature companies.
Yep.
And I think it comes down to people. When you have two teams that have, putting it lightly, been at each other's throats for a long time, it's very hard to share tools, and it's very hard to put the business interest first. I mean, this is what I see at Viavi, where you have a tool that literally both teams can use. I use the TiVo example because I've been asked straight out, is this network recorder, is it a security tool or is it a network performance tool? And I go, that's a bit like asking, is your TiVo for recording movies or for recording sports? And I go, okay, well, there's some features that are more like you'll use pause, you do a quick click back in sports more. But if you try and pin down, you go, it's a recorder, guys. It can be used by both. And that's actually kind of the strategy Viavi's taking, is saying, what would be slick is if you have an interface, click one button and it gives you all the, where's the packet loss, where's the jitter, what's the response times, and you slide that button to the other side and it's like, is there any SYN scanning going on? Is there any malformed packets? Is there any of that stuff? So it's the same literal ones and zeros, but just a different view. Going back, I think I took the long way to answer your question. Is there a champion? Yeah, I think the champions are coming out from all over the place. What I see out here on the West Coast in the Bay Area is you have people that are super good at something, kind of good at something, and so they just check all the boxes. And I'll give you an example. Like, you have a guy and he's a great coder. Let's just say Python whiz, right? And he's deployed a little bit of his stuff in Amazon. He's your now default cloud guy.
That's exactly. I agree. That's exactly how it happens. Yep.
So you have him, like a decent tech, right? But he's then just responsible for all the cloud. Number one, billing, right? Number two, all the security related to that. Getting the Amazon Cloud Professional certification, I was surprised how much of it is just wrapping your head around all the services and how they
terminology.
Build them.
And Matt, what's interesting about your example, and I don't want to pin it to any particular gender, but whatever, let's say it's a him, right? And that person has maybe studied computer science and been programming for a really long time, and they can write Lambda functions on the fly without having to read 8 Stack Overflow articles like I do, right? But that's been their focus. And they've learned enough about the cloud and networking to be able to maybe get some things done. And the better people in these positions are self-admitting that they're not networking experts. They've I took a couple of Pluralsight courses and read some articles online and pieced a few things together over my career, but I'm not a networking expert, right? And that's when it gets kind of dangerous. And I think it's the flip side when you're a network or security person, and you spend all those time, like you've read TCP/IP Illustrated Volume 1 cover to cover twice, right? You've done DNS deployments and attacks and all that stuff, and then you do some coding, and you're like, and they're like, well, you can open source that? And you're like, I don't know if I want anyone else to see my code, right? So there's both sides of this equation, but I really truly believe that this is a part of these personas that are champions on either side of the fence. Jeff, your hand was up first.
I wanted to sort of further the example, Matt. You described what you see in many companies as silos. I very often see them and refer to them as fiefdoms, meaning that very often it's not ignorance that creates the silos and there's people doing the same thing and they don't know it. It's very often power struggles within organizations where right or wrong, people don't want to give up on things because they're afraid they're going to lose their job, they're going to lose their power status, whatever. Most of the time it's a job security thing. Do you see that at all? And how do you think it plays in sort of to all of this discussion? How does corporate culture play into how do you fix things?
I'd say it's huge. And I keep using the phrase, it has to come from the top down, but I know when I chatted with Paul earlier, I've come across one company that had over 500 employees that I asked them straight out, how does your network and NetOps and SecOps, how well do they play together? And they said, we play together really great. And I kind of dropped my pen and I was like, are you telling me the truth? This is the first time I've really heard just it's great. And the answer they gave me was, well, the guy that runs the network engineering team, he was originally hired and ran the security team for 3 years. So everybody knows each other, everybody plays along well. And I go, oh, well then that makes sense. Otherwise, the fiefdom you describe, it is in full effect out there in newer companies, older companies. I'd say the companies that are larger, that have been in existence for 15 years or more, those walls, like when you go to an old archaeology site,
they
and
get
you see
higher.
walls built on walls.
Yes. As time goes on, you're absolutely right. If you don't address the issue, those walls will get higher and much more difficult to break them down. Now, that's not to say it's impossible, because I truly believe in my experiences in my own career, there are things you can do to break down these silos, to take it back to NetOps versus SecOps. And I think one, going back to, again, when I worked at the university, I felt like this was a huge win in my career and the culture that was at the university. There was the ERP team that largely grew from mainframes, right, and probably still run today, mainframe, applications on a mainframe, and they were. I was warned that there were very high walls around this group, right? And rightfully so. A lot of the business operations for the university were running applications that they managed. But one day, and this speaks to your point about the Viavi solution, right? One day they were having some issue. I believe it was with Telnet, right, or FTP. I think it was actually FTP, because that's how they moved jobs between systems and stuff. And they were having some problem. They couldn't figure it out. And I kind of caught wind of it. I'm like, hey, do you mind if I just look at the network traffic and help you troubleshoot this? And they're like, we're really stumped. So you're the new guy. Hey, if you want to step in, whatever. And I was able to help them troubleshoot the problem just by looking at network traffic, right? And I'm like, your configuration's wrong, or the port, or whatever, right? I forget exactly what the issue was, but through my packet captures, I was able to help them solve the problem. They were very appreciative of that, and the wall came down several stories, since I had done that. And then I'm like, well, if you run into this problem again, I'm happy to help, right? And that really helped lower the bar. Now, I had my tools in place for security, but Matt, like you said, they can be used for other things too. Yeah. And the byproduct of this is we can help bring down those silos with these kind of tools.
Yeah, I think it's not to get people to work together. We start talking about efficiency within companies in general, and I'm not a fan of getting everybody out to the forest and doing trust falls or that kind of thing.
Yeah,
it's really spending the time, taking a hard look at pretty much everybody just wants to do their job and do it well, right? And so you look at those points of friction. One example that I bump into, I'll ask SecOps team, how often do you have to go request information from the network team, whether it's a packet capture, whether it's a copy of a config of something? And usually the answer is quite a bit. And what happens is then the NetOps team goes, oh, you want something from me? I've been trying to get this firewall port open for a week. So how about you do something about that before I help you? You do that times 10, times 100 over the course of a year. If you don't address those type of points of conflict with clear procedures that are enforceable, because just having the manager go in and going, come on guys, play nice, get the security team what they want, that doesn't fix it. But having the culture adopt the fact of like, look, I'm already underwater with my thing and you're going to come to me and I have to treat you like an internal customer and treat just like a customer was asking for something urgently. That is kind of a longer shift, but I've seen it work. But it takes more than just one email from a VP saying play nice. It's a work in progress.
Hold on.
It takes people.
Larry, did you have comments? You had your hand up earlier.
Oh yeah, it was definitely a comment about Matt and his choice of analogies with the TiVo. It just goes to show how long that Matt's actually been involved in technology and gadgets.
So
my kids have no idea what a TiVo is, but they know when you fast forward, you go boop 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 boop.
Boop, boop, boop. You got it.
Lee.
So you remind me back of a conversation I had with our a former deputy department head, where he talked about all the rice bowls, and he actually had a shirt made at one point to make his point and said mine, 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 mine everywhere. And you're right. It takes more than a single message from the VP. Building relationships, breaking down barriers is ongoing. Although sometimes it's important, we found it was important to also make sure everybody understood who the internal and external customers were, and did they know them other than a name on a screen. The thing that's killing me about this was in like 1998. That problem still exists as the technology has changed and they're doing more, which is really cool, but it's surprising that we haven't gotten past that.
Totally.
Is it getting better?
It's the fact that you're still surprised, Lee, that hasn't quite earned you curmudgeon status yet.
That's really funny.
Touche.
Do we need to go do a trust fund?
Right.
I was ready to ask, when do we sing Kumbaya?
Yeah. Team building.
Or we need to invite in the Bobs, and it's very important to have people skills.
Yeah. And I mean, those friction points, they're just growing because it's no longer just NetOps versus SecOps. I mean, those are kind of the buckets we wanted to talk about today. But now you do have these developers. You do have guys on, special projects where the CFO goes, we're going to go to the cloud. Who's the cloud guy? And then you go, okay, well, we actually want it to be multi-cloud, because I read that you don't want to get locked in. I'm saying this as a CFO, right? So who's gonna manage all that? Then everybody else gets deprioritized against that. So you have everybody kind of annoyed at everybody else and wondering why it's not running like a smooth operation. Seems pretty clear.
Yeah, I'm interested to see how this plays out, right? Because we've got developers using a suite of really awesome tools and a lot of complexity that I think we can borrow from to deploy applications. But then we also still have on-premise stuff as well. So how do the teams divide, and how do they work? How do they work together and still learn from each other? If there's a team that maybe deployed Kubernetes or containers on-premise to deploy applications to maybe move some of that workload from VMs and VMware onto a more agile, for lack of a better term, environment, then you've got similar things happening in development and other teams providing services within the various cloud providers. And like you said, Matt, those could be all three, right? Your Windows team is likely working with Azure. right? So do you leverage that expertise? And I think that's really just going to vary based on organization and how much resources they have in each of these buckets.
Yeah, you mentioned mainframe earlier, and conceptually, I had someone bring up to me the other day that we're really going back in time. Like on those old mainframes, you used to buy a slice of time on that mainframe, and then everybody got the server, and then everybody got their local processing power, and now it's migrating back to where you're getting a little slice of time on this massive compute install somewhere on the globe. Where this is going to go next, if I knew that, then I probably wouldn't be here talking to you today.
Right.
But I think containerization is the next layer. Number one, because it does impact your development platform, right? Because if you develop inside the container, and that's also the same as your operations container, it's not the same as managing which OS did I develop this on? Has this been tested on all the patch levels? What do we support? It's just a container.
Right.
So it makes sense.
See, I truly believe it's going to be, for a while, a hybrid environment, right?
Yeah.
Where you're going to have some stuff that runs local. You're going to have some stuff that runs in containers. You're going to have some stuff that's cloud native, right? And then you're going to have applications that maybe cross all those boundaries. And for security and in terms of working together, I think that will make things better, because we're all going to be forced to work together to get our jobs done. But in terms of how we get security done in all these different environments remains to be seen. I spoke with my new friends one of my old friends and two of my new friends at Verica that are some of the engineers responsible for Netflix Chaos Monkey and some of the chaos engineering that has happened and evolved over time. And what they're saying is that the interesting thing, that go back to your example of mainframes and we're all sharing time, is that when people run Kubernetes, and Kubernetes is a really big thing right now, but what they're finding is when people say, I don't want to manage this myself, I want to put it in some cloud provider, they do that for a while, and then they get the bill. And they're like, okay, we're going to move this back to doing it locally because the bill is larger, and we're going to endure the pain and suffering of doing it locally. So, Jeff.
Well, I was thinking, Matt, before you brought up the mainframe example and sort of said, we're repeating ourselves, my thought was, because we've talked about how so much of this is cyclical and these problems have been around for a while, are there any lessons from the past that we can sort of predict how this is going to play out? I also feel compelled to say at this point that Kubernetes is just a fad.
Jeff, there's part of me that agrees with you, because there are, when we talk about looking at the past and past trends, there are technologies that very quickly come and go, right? Mm-hmm. And I think Kubernetes...
I was thinking more in terms of wireless and things like that, not necessarily that it's going away.
Right.
But the whole internet was a fad and wasn't going to stay.
It's true. It could stick around in various capacities, right? And I think that remains to be seen.
So, I mean, if we start using Kubernetes for porn, then problem solved. It'll be around forever.
It's true. It's a great point.
That's funny. Yeah, with Kubernetes, I'm going to stick my neck out and say something you don't hear a lot, which is I truly don't know enough about it to say whether or not the market is going to make it grow or shrink. I get that it's cool orchestration, and that I've talked to people that are rabid fans. I've also talked to people that go meh. I think the general vibe is changing after what you said, which was then they get the bill.
Yeah.
So much of the cloud stuff, and I harp on it, the decision to go it was a technology decision that was not made by the engineers. It was a financial decision to try and save money. And then what happened in the real world is you have, people doing their best, doing the project, which is to get into the cloud, and you get the bill and it's high. Now what? This had the opposite effect. Now what do we do? And so I think there is a little bit of an uptick to where they go, let's make sure we have an expert before we do it, instead of just, saying, I've got a lot of evidence that this is a good financial decision without understanding all the moving pieces. I've talked to a large company, and we were talking about his Azure bill, and I kind of threw out my questions. Like, I know a bit about cloud. I wouldn't call myself a guru, but he told me straight up. He's like, Matt, I've got 1 million line items on my bill. I don't even know where to start.
Wow.
And so how do you dig yourself out of that? There's a whole industry, which is like, you went into the cloud. Now you have a huge bill. Let us help you with that.
Yeah. One of my previous coworkers works for Cloud Checker, right? It's big. I think still pretty big in that space, correct?
Yeah. So so there you have it. And so where does this put the security guy? Going back to security, are they going to get more of a say at the table? I think really what it's going to come down to are the fallout. You mentioned a Marriott breach again.
Yeah.
So now what happens? If there's not real pain, then the opinion in these enterprises of the security team is a necessary evil that slows down our release date until they go, okay, these guys are necessary because of X damage that's real to me. I think they're still going to be like, arm wrestling at the table every week to try and, make themselves heard.
Jeff's jumping out of his seat. He's like that grade school, waving his hand kind of thing.
Horseshack. Welcome back. No, I wanted to get some clarification, and you may not know the answer to this. Maybe it's an opinion thing, but is the perception when you first get the bill that Kubernetes or whatever you've bought into is just that expensive and there was hidden costs and you got suckered essentially, or is there a perception from the management that signed up for it because they thought it would be cheaper that their people are not trained well enough to have implemented it in a cost-effective manner, let's say?
Great question, Jeff.
Great question. The answer is the people. I have yet to see an example where someone blamed the tech provider, whether it's the cloud provider itself, an orchestration like Kubernetes gone haywire. It always starts, and I'm sure you guys will start thinking of stories that fit into this. The guy who gets the bill goes to the cloud guy and asks, what happened? And he goes, and then the fingers start pointing. He goes, well, the developers were supposed to do blah, and I think that they did blah. And then the processing over here, the server guys are supposed to manage things this way, and CPU and da-da-da-da. And then the guy that opens the bill just goes, just fix it. So then you have the guy in charge of the cloud trying to rein in the developers. The developers go to a meeting going, hey, we're not going to meet our targets if we don't get what we need. And then the die is cast. You're in the cloud. Now it becomes a lot of arm wrestling match. And you'll notice security isn't involved in any of this. This is a financial decision. And so the whole who has access to even fire this stuff up? How's data being protected? Like, you put it in a container. Has someone checked the permissions on this? Is that even being done? This is all secondary to the billing problem. And what we're finding is, at least, this part is opinion, is those guys wearing the blazers that are looking at the bill go out, for old fashions after work and going, I don't think the cloud guy was ready for this. And I could have told him that years ago and going, yeah, he can migrate stuff, but there's a lot of moving parts that just like you're not going to be able to take into account. And the cloud provider kind of gives the impression that they're trying to help. And if you look at it, and I'd say they are. Like, they give you a lot of tools to manage your billing, but the bottom line is they want to get paid. So if I use all the data on my cell phone, they'll send me a warning saying, hey, you're getting closer to the limit. But how much time are they going to spend to educate me, especially if it's very complex,
but
like
Matt,
cloud environment?
I think the difference in the cloud is you have to configure those alerts and monitoring yourself. Yeah. Now, in AWS is the one I'm most familiar with. they do make it easier to configure those things, in my opinion, right? It's integrated into a lot of their solutions to
I agree.
check a box and go, yeah, I want to know when that happens, right? But if you don't know how to configure it, or if it's more difficult than checking a box, an event could happen. That could be native to your application. It could be a mistake by one of your employees, or it could be an external attacker has used your site as a launch point for distributed denial of service and racked up a huge bill, right? So this, coming full circle to our conversation, requires a lot of collaboration between all of the teams that we've mentioned, between however you want to term your network, your systems administrators, your developers, and your security people. I truly believe have to work more closely together than ever before. If there was ever an opportunity to be a successful organization, that this collaboration is paramount to that.
I would love to hear your thoughts on the lone wolf problem, whether it's a coder, a network guy, SecOps guy, or any other department. What I've seen is you have somebody that's got mad skills, top of the food chain, does not play well with others. And so what you're doing is you're acquiring advanced technical skills at the expense of that collaboration you're describing. And I think that's a huge part of the problem now, is that you'll have a project, you look for an expert, they come in, and it's not a team situation. It's this is my fiefdom,
right?
And
but that's still not new. How is it worse in a cloud environment?
Well, because that one person can stand up a whole ton more infrastructure than you could ever do before. I mean, if you script this with APIs and command lines, you can build out enormous amounts of infrastructure with just that one person. And it only takes one mistake to be catastrophic from a security perspective, from a reliability perspective, or from a billing perspective. And Matt, to answer your question, I think for those three reasons, that's why we need to work together to have that oversight. And to give you an example, our developer and myself work very closely with each other, and it's a small team, so we're not accomplishing
not closer than
6 feet. We do a lot of Zoom today because he's not even coming into the office. But Marcin and I watch each other for configurations, right? We make sure stuff's being backed up. We make sure that that's not going to generate a big bill. We make sure that's not going to be insecure. We make sure there's not infrastructure hanging around we're not using, right? And I think it takes that oversight of more than one person to be able to accomplish that in the cloud today, because it's so easy to make a mistake, and those mistakes can be very costly.
Yeah, I think you're right. And again, I don't think we're going to see change until there's some serious consequences. The size and how quickly data breaches are happening, it's just increasing. So what's the impetus for a company to change their strategy and get an expert in there that has to rubber stamp before any changes are made to the cloud or anything like that?
Now, Matt, I know you appeared on Security Compliance Weekly.
I did.
Which is awesome. If you haven't checked out that show, make sure you check it out. Jeff, Josh Marpet, and Scott Lyons and Matt Alderman host that show, and it's just awesome. I hear it in the background when I'm here in the office, and it's really awesome. And recommend that to your auditors and compliance folks as well. But we do something a little different here on Paul Security Weekly. We ask every new guest 5 questions. So, Matt, are you ready to play 5 questions with Security Weekly?
Sure, let's do it.
3 words to describe yourself.
Stuck at home.
If you were a serial killer, what would be your weapon of choice?
Ooh. Morningstar.
If you wrote a book about yourself, what would the title be?
Redheaded, glasses, and braces.
In the popular game of Ask Grabby Grabby, do you prefer to go first or second?
Don't know what that is, but I think there's always an advantage in just going first.
Choose 2 celebrities to be your parents.
Alive, dead, fictional, or otherwise.
Archimedes and let's go Cleopatra.
Very nice. Matt, thank you so much for appearing on Security Weekly. Folks that want to learn more about the Viave solution, go to securityweekly.com/Viave. Matt, thank you again.
Thanks, guys.
And with that, that will conclude this segment on Paul Security Weekly. Stay tuned. Lori Cranner's coming up next to talk about IoT security and privacy.